So, welcome everyone to another episode on resilience where we're addressing shame today. So, my name is Muna Laragat. I'm your host and the founder of The Grit Makers, a company that delivers workshops and coaching programs to help you excel burnout free. On this live podcast, we're uniting amazing creators, entrepreneurs, leaders, and builders to inspire and be inspired. So today I'm joined with three fantastic souls, and you might recognize one from the previous Women and Resilience episode. But they are joining me to share their resilience stories worth spreading. So without further ado, Michael, can you please do us the honors and introduce yourself briefly with your own personal definition of resilience?
Oh, really? Right. Well, now I don't have a particular personal definition of resilience, but I do know that shame sometimes is in opposition to resilience because shame is more the thing I'm comfortable with. Sometimes shame is in opposition with resilience, or resilience is in opposition to shame, and sometimes they collude. And that's what I'm probably going to talk about, that sort of split relationship shortly.
Mhm. And do you want to give us a little background about yourself? Shall I introduce you as a writer, as a therapist?
Uh, I'm really a psychotherapist in the NHS in London, and I work in an adult trauma service, and I also work part of the week in a child clinic, very often with children who've struggled with trauma. And so shame comes up quite a bit in my work.
And we'll definitely talk a little more about that. But in the meantime, Snezhana, am I pronouncing it right? Did I
Yeah,
get it right straight away?
it's Snezhana. It's a
Snezhana.
very difficult name to pronounce if you're not from the Slavic countries.
But it is very beautiful. And also I do like seeing it written. It's a shame on this broadcasting platform we don't have the little tilde on the je.
Yeah, it actually means, translated to English, it means Snow White. Um, yeah, I know. But so I'm Snezhana. I'm a story strategist and writer, but I wasn't always. I used to work as a personal brand manager at a UK-based company and as a content marketing manager at a US-based company. But then I decided to make a change because I wanted to be able to help people on my own terms and without having to execute on strategies that didn't sit well with me and that went against my values, like inducing FOMO, creating scarcity, or even just blatantly lie to people. Yeah. So, one day I said, enough is enough. And I realized that I couldn't change people, I couldn't change the politics. And I decided to see what is in my control. And I started my freelancing business. And now I'm a story engineer. My boyfriend loves when I call myself a story engineer because he's in hydro engineering. Um, but yeah, I help women bridge the gap between who they think they need to be, should be on LinkedIn in order to be liked, accepted, make more money, make more impact, and who they are at their core. So they can create from a place of personal truth, not fear, not shame. And yeah, I feel definitely more powerful, not powerless anymore. And yeah, when it comes to my own personal definition of resilience, I honestly had to Google and to see what other people say about resilience. And what I found is it's a lot of pushing through, powering through, recovering faster from setbacks. And I like those definitions, but I wanted to see if I had, you know, anything new to say from my own experiences. And to me, resilience is when I'm standing in front of a bridge at a gorge in Slovenia, and I'm scared of water and the heights. And I can make that move. I can step onto the bridge. And my mind starts bullying me into powering through and crossing that bridge. But my body's just standing there, frozen in place. And in that moment, I decided to turn around, go back. I said that to my boyfriend, and he said, "But where are you going? This is a one-way trail. You can't go back." And I said, "Watch me. I'm leaving this place." And I found my way back. I was, saying, "Sorry, excuse me," to people while passing by, but I found my way out, and I realized today is not that day. Today is not that day. Maybe next time I will cross that bridge, but today's not that day because I'd rather honor where I'm at emotionally, mentally, and physically than just power through and,
Mm.
yeah.
This terminology is super interesting. This idea of powering through quite often come up when we talk about resilience, and I think it stems as well a lot of the negative connotations people usually would have around
Mhm.
resilience. This concept or preconceived idea that it's about pushing at all costs. It's
Mhm.
kind of like going to startup growth at all cost, or like continuous excellence at all costs at the detriment of our mental health. But it's actually the definition we use in my business, at least, is really looking at growth and really looking at expansion. Is how, when you turn back, you engineered new skills to make your way back without, whilst going against the grain that forced you to go
Mhm.
that way. So how did you find a different way to navigate that? And I think it's an important thing to highlight that linked to resilience is a lot of learning and how we learn and how we grow, and not always necessarily killing yourself, basically.
Yeah, my body was telling me no,
Yeah.
and my mind was bullying me into crossing that bridge. But I decided to listen to my body that day, and I loved it.
That's good. Thanks so much for sharing.
Welcome. Thank you.
How, how about you, Amity? Thanks for joining us again. I know this subject have come up and has been quite attractive to actually look at resilience from a different angle and also address something that we don't address in the workplace so much, which is shame.
Yeah, so I'll do an intro for those who don't know me. My name's Amity Peace, and I'm the founder of Mangrove. So at Mangrove, we help businesses build resilience. And so effectively, what that is helping businesses to take stock of what they have, understand what's important, so they can use that to build, adapt, and thrive. So it's not necessarily, I guess, doing things that you're uncomfortable with or stepping so far outside of your comfort zone that you can't respond to a scenario. It's understanding truly what you have, why it's important, and in every scenario you can best respond because you have that transparency of your business, which means you can hopefully emerge stronger at the end. So that's what we do at Mangrove. And I think because I have been working in this industry for such a long time, that I think the build, adapt, thrive is really something that resonates with me as an individual. So yeah, it's about knowing who I am, what makes me special, and then I can use that to respond to a lot of different scenarios that come up.
Yeah, a lot of things that we say in many different previous episodes. Actually, every time we talk about like resilience, we get back to everything is figure outable. You're gonna figure things out no matter what. Um, but before we get there and dive into and dive closer to the shame topic, I wanna let Michael give us a little bit more insights about himself. But most importantly, Michael, I discovered you through like your book on the shame deception. It really brought us together and brought all of us in this room together, to be honest. Um, so, yeah, blatantly, what got you to be so passionate about shame? You mentioned the work you were doing. Was it all that?
Yeah, so just to follow Shazna's point about story technology, I'm probably going to get through through a couple of digressions, but I'm going to try and make it reasonably concise, but just flag me out if I'm really rambling. So to answer why I got interested in this area is that shame's a big problem in mental health, and mental health is a big problem that's getting bigger. I was taught along with my colleagues that shame is a moral emotion that stops us doing bad things and that tells us when we've done something bad. Yet day after day in my work, I noticed that it wasn't the abusers and the bad people who walked away with the shame and the guilt. It was their victims who walked away with the shame and the guilt. So, how does that fit with what we're taught about shame being something that stops us doing bad things? Something's not right. It seemed there was either a design flaw in human nature, or at least a flaw in what we understand about shame. So, in terms of design flaws in human nature, here's another one. For the first 18 months of our lives, we have big emotions, big feelings anyway, and no words. And for the rest of our lives, we have lots of words and we don't say another word about them. So there's something strange going on there as well. Why don't we talk about emotions? In fact, we're encouraged not to talk about emotions. We're told to grow up when we're distressed. We're told to man up, don't be a drama queen, snap out of it, etc. Then we have some funny assumptions about our human design. So we're told we're a rational species, when in fact we're an emotional species that got ashamed of our emotions. How rational does that sound? Here's the rational progression when it comes to trauma. I've been punished. There must be a reason. I must be bad. Then we've got this assumption that if I suffer a mental health problem, I'm defective. 350 million of us suffer depression. In fact, that's a wild underestimation. And all the statistics show that all of us are going to face some sort of mental health difficulty at some point in our lives. And yet, we rationally still believe that if we struggle with a mental health problem, it's like we're in a race and we've fallen in a puddle in the first 3 yards and there's something wrong with us. All those 350 million people can't be bad, lacking in dignity, goodness, moral fiber, and to bring it back to Mona's question, they can't all be lacking in resilience. Shame and resilience are sometimes in opposition, and sometimes they do seem to collude. Every day I work with people with high pain tolerance levels. So, Mona, to answer your question, which I failed to answer at the start, how do I define resilience? I guess that's how I define it. High pain tolerance levels. And the problem with people with, well, first of all, people who suffered a lot of trauma tend to have high pain tolerance levels. Then they get used to it. Then you tell them they've been through something terrible and they say, what are you talking about? They're really skeptical when you tell them what they've been through. They think you're making it up. They think that that you're trying to placate them or make their lives, make them feel less ashamed. That's not the purpose. But because of what they've survived, they really struggle to get it. To come back to the 350 million people for a moment, the original meaning of shame is to hide, it's to cover up. If all of us are secretly covering up our mental health, and all of us are likely to encounter a mental health problem, then all of us think we're defective, and all of us think that we're the only one who's suffering. When we experience trauma, very often a mental health problem will follow. So you've got two problems then. I wonder if, I don't know how I'm doing for time, but there's just two short paragraphs that starts off one of the stories in the book, which is Maddie's story, and it just sort of tries to explain a little bit about Maddie, if I can find it.
And just for context to everyone here and the audience, within the book, we're going through people's stories about shame, and the cover-up stories, and whether they're telling themselves or not. Michael here is about to share an extract from it.
Thanks, Mona. No, I can't find it. Sorry, just give me another second, because I'm looking in the wrong place.
Well, if it's the wrong book, we don't know that's the story going to be.
So just, I think this is from the prologue, just two short paragraphs. This is to illustrate some of this resilience shame business. If Maddie happened to be a boxer during the platinum era of US heavyweights, and she took a headshot in the ring from Sonny Liston, Muhammad Ali, or Joe Frazier, she would have got up every time. Maddie would not only have beaten the 10 count, she'd have been up before you knew she was down. Maddie would not display hurt, no matter what, not under any circumstances. Even if George Foreman had caught her with a haymaker full heft off the ropes and knocked her down dead, she'd still have got back up again. If she'd been a soldier captured by the enemy, even under torture, she'd have given nothing away. With my low pain tolerance and questionable courage, I'd give up most of what I knew before Maddie would so much as relinquish her name, rank, or serial number. So I do work with quite a few people who are rather like Maddie. And the problem with high pain tolerance levels, and that's not necessarily the only definition of resilience, but the problem is that such people absorb so much and feel that they can't go to anybody for help, that eventually they short circuit. And it can lead to tragic consequences. It can certainly lead to all kinds of worse problems. But also shame is a strange emotion. It's an emotion that doesn't like emotions, and it hates disclosure because it means to hide. And shame seems to be a sort of predominant emotion. If shame is in series with any other emotion, shame seems to dominate. The best counterweights to shame that I think might help the right sort of resilience are what we're actually all doing now, which is disclosing, talking about it in a community of people. It doesn't have to be a community, it could just be one person. And it certainly doesn't need to be a therapist that you disclose to, just someone you trust. Because the other thing that's sort of covered up is that even though many of us are very unkind to ourselves and have very loud inner critics and are not compassionate to ourselves, human beings tend to be compassionate to other people. But because we're not compassionate to ourselves, we don't know that. You only know it when you disclose, and it's only when you disclose that other people can disconfirm that you're the bad person that you thought you were.
That is so true. That resonates so much. And I think in sharing these stories, this is how we got together. So we were sharing, Michael and I, within our books and through writing. And then this is how I stumbled across Susanna's article or blog, but no, it was a LinkedIn post about shame. Just few minutes after Michael and I finished our call about shame. And it was really interesting, and the serendipity getting us to discuss and share experiences around it. So I couldn't resist having us in this room to address this big elephant that we try to hide under a very tiny carpet. So tell us a little more about you, because in your creative job and helping women kind of reshape their stories as well, I think you're so bold and you come across so bold. And by bold, I mean being able to say, I don't want to work for someone who is going to dictate to me how to do my job against what I believe, right? That's what I call bold. And having that courage to step away and create your own rules in your own work. What made this desire not only to go against the grain, but most importantly, this desire for authenticity? Because I think it is a lot about authenticity, not wanting to just follow templates.
Oh, templates. Oh, we call them soulless templates. And some people call me soulful storyteller. So a soulful storyteller cannot use soulless templates. Thank you so much for seeing me as a bold person and for noticing and acknowledging the authenticity that I put into my work. Because I didn't start out this way in life in general. What happened to me and what I see now happening with the women that I work is I was rejected so many times growing up, right? And when I think about that, there's one story that pops up, and it's me sitting with one of my now ex-friends at a bar, drinking cocktails, talking about love, life, relationships. And I was having a great time until she said something that really froze me in place. This is what she told me. If you were just a little bit less of yourself, we could be much, much better friends. And I remember not being able to move muscle. I didn't say a word back on the topic. I think I just changed the subject very quickly. And I believe I felt very ashamed. But I was ashamed of myself. That's a funny thing, right? I didn't blame her. I was just hurt by her. But I was ashamed of those parts, and I blamed those parts for not being as accepted and liked. And I've found myself in many, many similar situations throughout my life, like this one. And, after countless heartbreaks, I decided to come up with a master plan. The master plan was, all right, I'll just polish up the parts of me that seem to be acceptable, right? And I'll tuck away the rest. I'll just hide the parts that are responsible for making my life a living hell, right? Because for a long time I was in this constant tug of war between not being quite enough and being too much, like too intense, too deep, right? And it was a survival mechanism. I thought, okay, I will dial it all down to make others feel comfortable around me. And my plan worked, guys. It worked. People started loving me, right? And I finally started feeling like I belong somewhere. It was a good feeling. I was seen, which did not happen during my childhood years. So that feeling was like, I need to hold on to this forever. But the more they loved me, the more I hated myself, right? And what was funny, when I would experience another heartbreak, of course, I would feel hurt. But then at the end of the day, I would laugh because they didn't like me. They liked the fraud me, right? So I'm bold now because I used to be a fraud. And that didn't serve me well at all. And, but things started to change about 2 years ago when I started somatic therapy sessions. Yay. And when I met my storytelling mentor, and I learned a lot about, storytelling. I learned a lot about my body. And like Michael said, I remember walking into my therapist's office and telling her, listen, when I talk, I'm a know-it-all. I don't want to talk anymore. I just want to feel. Like, I'm ready to feel and process, because while growing up, I was rationalizing my feelings and what was happening. And I was thinking about my feelings very obsessively. But then I was ready to just like, rip me apart. I'm ready, right? Because my mental health started to just fall apart. Because when you hold on to that false identity for so long, and I was holding on to it for 2 decades almost, it catches up with you. So when I work today with women, I remember when I met my first client and my second and my third, and my perspective on things changed. Because when I would open up their LinkedIn profile, I would see a story. Their LinkedIn profiles were telling a story. And then when I would interview them in my story storm sessions, I would unearth their real, raw, powerful, unapologetic selves. And I would notice that disconnect. It was a huge gap, right? And no matter, like, okay, sure, they had some success, right, with their posting and their business, but they constantly felt like something was missing. And that's how I used to feel. Something is missing here. And I kept looking for it again in a very obsessive way, because this can't be it. Like one of my clients, she loves to say, I'm in a bad movie. Like, I was in a very bad movie and I wanted out of that movie. I wanted to create a new one. But when I would present that story back to them, that real, raw, unapologetic version, they would be very hesitant to dive deeper into that story. And at first, I didn't really figure out why. But then I realized, oh, they are afraid that truth, that story, would expose the truth, right? The real truth. And it would invite rejection, it would invite misunderstanding, and even mockery. Because when they did live that story out loud, they were rejected, and they were misunderstood, and they were mocked. So we had a very hard time in the beginning diving into that story, because when you want to show to the world who you are, it's your core. It feels scary. It feels like you're peeling back layers and layers and layers of protection, and you don't want to do that. But at the same time, your body and mind is screaming for you to do something differently, and to step into your personal truth and live that truth out loud and not care, right? And things started to change a little bit when we realized one thing. We may feel safe when we don't allow the world to see us for who we are. But in reality, what's happening, we are not becoming more safe. We're not feeling more safe. We're becoming and feeling more isolated, right? More depressed, more feeling displaced. And all of a sudden, that realization hurt more, right? And as they started owning that story, literally by finding micro stories and shaping micro stories and posting micro stories, one story at a time, they started owning that story, right? And I started owning mine. That's what happened. I started owning mine. And every single time I helped a woman step into her power, I stepped more into mine. And I can proudly say that I feel like I'm finally home. Like I belong now, and I belong to myself. So yeah,
Mhm.
long story short, that this is the journey of me hiding those parts and my God-given gifts, right? To now doing my best to be in that and live that truth out loud and share it unapologetically and unashamedly.
Yeah.
And life is short. That's the shortest answer. Life is short.
Life is way too short. But it is true. It is by sharing and creating that moment. And as you say and mention, it's like a two-way street. I think
Mhm.
quite often there is that um, pressure. And I think that's probably something that you guys can relate. When you are a resilience expert, or when you are a coach, or when you are a therapist, or when you are a storyteller, there's this massive pressure on your shoulder. It's a two-way, it's a one-way street. You're the expert, pour onto me your expertise, and you have the client or patient or the person on the other side that is just expecting the holy grail and forget that you're just another human being going through your own journey in,
Yeah.
in that sense. But it's not about them forgetting that, it's about us forgetting that, and it's on us to give ourselves that grace. And I think we had so many conversation around this then with Amity. In I know how talented she is when it comes to business resilience and business continuity, because we think of resilience long term. But we started talking a lot about these shame conversations and actually the importance of the human component
Yeah.
of the resilience work. So we talk about processes and operations, but they're all made and done by people for people.
Precisely. Yeah.
So how did you see shame getting in the way of the business resilience?
It's actually quite interesting. I was going to reference that conversation that we had the other day about like people build processes and processes are built of people. And at the core of every business is people. And then like two things that were mentioned is like shame is something that people hide. And, you know, when we have a mental illness or maybe we have a potential improvement in a business, the first reaction, which I think is maybe a condition of society and the way that we're raised, is to be shameful about something. And so, like these conversations that we're having about honoring ourselves, being true to ourselves, wanting to be better, I think these are very much linked to businesses as well. Because in my work and with the companies that I have worked with, whenever I go in and I try and find improvements. So the first step is to look at a business holistically and understand what are its strengths, what are its weaknesses. We want to make sure that we obviously highlight the strengths because this is what is going to keep the business going. And when we find weaknesses, we want to go and improve those. So when you bring these weaknesses forward to businesses, the first response is shame, and nobody wants to make change, and change is difficult. So like the way that I counter that, which was really interesting, is I spend a lot of time educating the business. So we remove that shame and we remove the blame from people because, oh, this is my process that I created and it needs improvement. So therefore I am against the change because I automatically feel change because it's not adequate. So yeah, it's really interesting that these, I guess, are the same in individual resilience and how we treat shame and how we improve ourselves. I think there is a very intrinsic link between like individuals and businesses, because at its core, like a business is just a bunch of people trying to build towards a common goal and make sure that it succeeds. So yeah, it's been interesting to hear these different perspectives.
And it's funny because there is also a preconceived idea about how things are supposed to go in business and in startup. Like, how does this concept and theory opposed to the reality? Because a lot of startup fail at the moment, and there's like, we're going back to the bully have no shame, but the bully set the rules,
Yeah.
and then the victim of the rules.
Yeah, 100%. So I think this is like at the core what we're trying to change at Mangrove is, first of all, people tend to reverse engineer resilience. So they build these companies, and when things start falling apart, they come to a specialist like me or somebody else and say, fix our business, make us resilient. But realistically, like, we're trying to find everything that sits in your business and build that process backwards. So at Mangrove, we're trying to build that in from day one. So when you start building a product and service and you start, trying to create a company, if you think about resilience much earlier, you think like from day one, you understand all your strengths and weaknesses, you have transparency across the business so you can make better decisions. And then you can bypass this narrative of what we expect from startups, because you have everything at your fingertips to make the correct decisions. Typically in the startup industry, what we see is people find a problem, they find a solution, they forget about the problem, they forget about the people, and they just focus on the solution. And then the next step is build towards vanity metrics. How many customers do you have? How much of the market have you acquired, etc.? And they forget about all these things that we need to be able to have a successful business. So the idea is like, we want to educate, we want to remove the shame around when things go wrong in a business. We want to be able to help founders talk about it in a better way and continually improve themselves. So you can only do that by having transparency. And so these are the things that we're kind of trying to work on and change in the industry. So then people naturally become more resilient, or their businesses also become more resilient.
So there's a very nice parallel between human resilience and humanity and like the systems that we create, right? It's all about that transparency and that disclosure, and like sharing. The more we share about the systems that don't work or the components of these processes that don't work, the more we share about what we considered a flaw or something that we were too shameful to share, the more we provide that transparency and share, the more we gain community and strength.
It also becomes more relatable as well, like the more you speak about something, the more you realize like, I'm not like a monster with orange polka dots. You know what I mean? Like, it just becomes something that is like, oh, well, this person also has the same thing. Oh, this person also had the same business problem. Or, you know what I mean? It just becomes less taboo.
Yeah. Well, I guess you're definitely earning your Halloween costume with orange polka dots. And it's I mean, I think I'm super grateful for you all to share your own personal experience around that within like your business, within what you have seen, within what you have experienced. I want to pause and just allow us to reflect and digest all this information. And I want to thank our audience for joining us today. And guys, if you want to leave us any comments, what's your own experience? What are your own definitions? Please do so. Alongside the questions, of course, that we will address in the other part, the third part of the live. But yeah, thank you for joining us. So as we reflect on how these journeys, all our journeys have shaped us and brought us here today, how we connected, of course, I'm asking about which kind of resilience does it take to snap out of shame? And we talked a lot about disclosure and transparency. And I guess by which kind of resilience, I'm not necessarily referring to, when we look at the textbook answer definitions, but I'm more thinking of a maybe practical example that some of you have already given. How do you get yourself out of that stage where you're like, okay, our business failed. we've gone down that route. We're feeling shameful, or our business or something. How do we snap out of it?
I mean, I can jump in. I talk about this all day, every day. So I think, first of all, like, we need to overcome, I guess, maybe it's not always shame that people feel, maybe it might be embarrassment or whatever. I think like you need to sit with this and understand like that something has gone wrong. And the best way to do that typically is to kind of do a retrospective analysis of what has happened. So from a business perspective, we look at like, what were the successes? What were the failures? Maybe there was some factor we didn't mitigate before we got there. And so like, I also apply this in my own life when things don't go right. Maybe I was trying to get a client and I went through a really long process, invested a lot of time, and it didn't materialize into something. I think the number one thing to be able to improve is to have a look at learnings, because for me personally, if something happens and I didn't learn anything from it, I'm not taking value. So that's a lot of like what the work that we do when things do go wrong. And then also that helps you to improve next time or do something different and maybe avoid these circumstances from materializing again.
So you'll look out for the learning and the lesson that you get.
Like the moral of the story or the lesson of the story or something to try and help you build for next time. Because I think as humans, if we don't learn from something, we'll just continually keep making the same mistakes. And also you can look at somebody else's lessons, but they may not always resonate with you. So it's really, really good to have your own learnings and have your own reflection and have your own growth. Because like, when you're young, for instance, like I look at my nieces, every time we put birthday cakes in front of them when they're really little, we tell them don't touch the candles. And every year, the youngest one always touches the candles because they have to learn that lesson themselves, So I think it's kind of similar. Like that was a very, I'm just trying to parallel, you can watch someone touch a candle, but it's not the same until you do it yourself. So, yeah.
And that's interesting because we see other people going through it, but we think we're the special one until we do. Until we do go through it. And then I guess we feel guilt for not listening or not taking the lesson in. I think that was a conversation, or I think it was a question I asked Michael, what was the difference between shame and guilt and how these coexist or go hand in hand?
Yeah, they often tag team up. We're taught in psychology or psychotherapy that guilt is a healthy emotion that makes people repair things, and shame is one that is more likely people won't repair it because they'll hide it. But the truth is that they team up. Guilt tends to be remorse for something we've done, whereas shame tends to be regret and remorse for who we are. So shame is much more of a fit to fill emotion that expands in infinite space, but unfortunately attacks us in inner space.
So can we be shameful without feeling guilty?
Technically, yes. If I got a message on my mobile phone that said, "I know what you've done," I'd feel immediate guilt. I wouldn't know what it related to, but I would know that someone had found me out. And my automatic shame would predispose me towards extra guilt in that situation. So, that's the subject of The Trial by Franz Kafka. Someone's accused of something. They're not told what it is, and he becomes his own persecutor. He tries himself because to be accused is enough. So again, we carry such sensitive technology inside us that for some of us is very easily activated. I know for me it's very easily activated. So I tend to identify with clients, and with what both Amity and Shazna said. When we're more what other people want us to be, we're more allied with them, but we're more isolated than we've ever been before. And Amity made a very similar point about transparency. And it strikes me that, businesses, like people, need feedback loops, not black holes that things disappear into, but feedback loops where others are feeding back information. The problem with individuals is something that cognitive psychology refers to as negativity bias, which is that we've all got positive mirrors and negative mirrors, but we're much more interested in the negative stuff that people feed back to us, not the positive stuff. If you said 100 nice things to me and made one small criticism, 100 nice things out the door, out the window, I've no memory of them. I'm now focusing on that one thing. We prefer, or well, we don't prefer, we kind of do. We have a preference for negative information. It will obliterate positive information.
I have a question for you, Michael, in terms of the way that you do, you work with people. When you're addressing a lot of the shame, I guess this is typically related to negative experiences. Do you often spend time, on the point that you just mentioned, like celebrating the wins or the positivity? Is this some part of that process, or?
They'd laugh at me. They'd walk out of the session. They'd leave therapy. But what I do is I tell them that they've got a negative cabinet and the cabinet's overflowing, but at least they know where to file all the negative things. But if they got a compliment, there's no positive filing cabinet, so it flies away. They won't remember it. So I'll get them to journal. If I'll say to them, I want you to note down every compliment you get over the next week. Well, that's a ridiculous homework. No one ever gives me a compliment. Well, of course they don't. They do, but you don't notice it or you don't remember it because you're so fixed on the negative stuff. So I will get them to do homeworks like that. And occasionally they'll do it. And occasionally they'll get surprised by what they've actually collected. So they've got to become repositories of a different form of feedback loop from the one that they're designed for. And normally it will pass them by because they've got no apparatus for understanding positive things about themselves.
I remember once seeing an interaction between two women. I don't think they knew each other. And one said to another, "Oh my God, your t-shirt is beautiful." And the other one said, "Thank you." That was it. Thank you. And I imagine what my answer would be. It would go something like, "Oh, yeah, I bought it for like $1. Can you imagine? I mean, it's like 5 years old. Like, it's not that new." I would just keep talking and talking, but I wouldn't say thank you. Or I would say thank you, but at the end, and would, red in the face.
That's actually it's a very important thing. I think being able to accept compliment is definitely something I can relate to. I always have this discomfort around a compliment, but then over time I realized that it depends who it's coming from and how, same as feedback, if it was a desired or unsolicited. Is there such a thing as unsolicited compliments? But I would definitely tend to do that. "Oh yeah, thanks. Oh yeah, you got nice hair. Oh yeah, it took me an hour to do." First of all, because it does take a bloody hour to do. And second, because it is hard to just accept it for what it is, just a fact, a statement, and just be like, "Thank you," and fully sit with it and feel it and process it. And I think
it's so hard.
yeah, and probably hard because of other societal perceptions that were put into our head. Maybe because we want to have a certain humility, maybe because we just don't believe it deep down. There are many different reasons, but I think we saw very practical strategies to look at overcoming shame and different things. I'll definitely steal this idea from Michael. My next client, when we speak next, you know that you're going to have to add an extra prompt in your journaling session. It's really beautiful when we talk about celebrating the wins. And I think that's really important when we're building towards improvement, because yes, you can improve, but to be able to increase your capacity to improve, you need to celebrate the small wins. That's your fuel. That's how you continue expanding that resilience muscle as well. Because if you just stretch it, and that's why I picked up on your, like when you mentioned stretching, like pushing yourself, go push yourself, you stretch yourself, and it's like an elastic that eventually would break because you're stretching yourself too thin. So you need to be able to add some gel to lubricate everything. I'm thinking of my tendons because I have often tendonitis. So you need to lubricate everything so you can like continue expanding as opposed to stretching yourself. So when we talk about practical things, and thank you, Shamir, for your comments, you saying very, very practical and insightful conversation, and thank you all for sharing. Thanks, Shamir, for giving us feedback. We do love to celebrate small wins, and this is a very good one.
Thank you. It means a lot.
So yeah, what other practical things, guys, that you can think of that we can use in the day-to-day to overcome shame everywhere, whether it's in the workplace or within ourselves? Something practical. We have the journaling. What else?
I would say, looking into my own experiences, I would say reframing negative thoughts and taking action. So I have an example. I graduated from college 6 years ago, and I gained weight, a lot of weight. And for a very long time, I would literally avoid my own reflection in shop windows or when I would, brush my teeth in the morning, in the evening, I would just quickly look in my face and just like, okay, done, goodbye, right? I couldn't stay with myself for too long and look at myself. And I would hire gym trainers. I would start very strict workout programs. I would try eating the darn broccoli and salads and avocados, and I hated them. And I would train for 2 weeks, and then I would abandon everything for 2 years. And very recently, when I look back into that journey and my recent journey, I've been working out for 2 months now consistently. I know, thank you. And I wanted to see what changed, right? Like the person A and person B, they're not the same people. So what changed? Because, A, I'm a nerd. And like Kamiti said, I wanna know the lesson, right? I wanna know what the change is so I can sustain it. And I saw that what I did was changing the way I talked to myself. And then it changed how I felt about myself. And then it changed the actions I took. So for example, I remember one day I woke up very late in the morning. I think it was 11. And I had a story session at 2. And I drank a cup of coffee. It didn't work. I drank a second cup. It didn't work. I was panicking. And then I asked myself, what is it, that thing that we do that makes us feel alive? Like, what is it? And then an image popped up, and I saw myself with the headphones on dancing to music. I caught it and I was like, all right. So I stood up, I put the headphones on, I played my favorite music, and I danced for like 17 minutes. And when I finished the workout, I felt so much better. Like I remember sitting in the story storming session like this. I didn't need coffee, I didn't need lemonade or whatever. I just needed to take action, right? But what also changed in that whole self narrative was me going from I have to work out because I'm fat, so a lot of shame around that, to I will work out today because it makes me feel alive and it makes me feel energized. So from fat to energized, it's a long journey, right? But yeah,
Mm,
short answer, reframing thoughts and taking action.
mm,
Because if I didn't catch or if I ignored the image, I would just continue with my bad habits.
mm.
And I would put my body into more distress in my mind because I wouldn't be able to be present during the story storming session. And I couldn't afford that.
Yeah. Yeah, the language is a very, very powerful thing. And
Mm,
I think reframing is useful when we address that negative vocabulary and transform it, especially when it gets to dieting. The dieting world is always full of that, like slim down and
mm,
lose weight. And it's always, even like when you get into the recovery universe, when you're like trying to cut down on drugs, alcohol, nicotine, anything like that, you're focusing on the loss isn't helping. And even in branding and marketing,
mm,
when you reframe that language from negative to a positive, exactly like you say, you get so much more out of it.
mm,
You're not losing weight, you're gaining health, you're gaining fitness, you're gaining energy. And it's
mm,
the same for anything like to do with when you're looking at or cutting down alcohol, cutting down nicotine, cutting down drugs. Well, you're not losing anything. You're gaining clarity. You're
mm.
gaining health. You.
If you told me that, like, even 3 years ago, like, hey, you should do this because it's healthy for you, I would nod my head, but I would still not do it
Mm,
because I'm in pain. All I know that I'm in pain, but I don't know what the problem is,
mm,
right? And I don't even know how I arrived at that point to say, oh my God, I know what my problem is. I'm very abusive to myself. And it's connected to the way I'm speaking to myself. Oh my God, that's the problem. But I didn't know that. I just knew that I was in pain for 6 long years. And I wanted to see what external events triggered the inner change. Um, but I couldn't pick. I couldn't choose, you know. I maybe it's when I walked into my first Pilates class, and when the Pilates teacher, the trainer, she was telling us, "Oh, when you do this kind of exercise, your legs will love it, your back will love it," right? She was talking about those advantages, like benefits, and at the end, she would say, and oh, you look pretty, of course. So something in that interaction as well changed something in me to say, oh, yeah, it's really not about only do I look pretty, do I have this summer body, right? It's about my back hurts and there's a lot of pressure in my shoulders. And why when I wake up in the morning and I had 8 hours of sleep, I still feel deprived of that same sleep. So it was more about that than fact, but
Mhm.
I needed to get to that point to realize it.
Yeah, and it's also important like to have the right strategy, but also an environment. And by right, again, there's no right or wrong here. Um, is to have a strategy that works for us, but
Mm,
also trying to think, okay, is there how we can translate that to the community we surround ourselves. So, for example, how can we foster a culture in at work or with the people we interact with that reduces shame? What can we do to nurture an environment that reduces shame? I'm gonna start pointing at people if you guys don't stop.
Um, I don't know if this is like the same concept. It just kind of reminded me, like yesterday, I had a conversation with a founder from like a women's health startup, and like I was asking her about like what are some of the reasons why she thinks she's so successful, and how she thinks she managed to get to where she was. Like, what was that pivotal thing for her? And actually, the thing that really resonated with me is she was like, I don't actually think that it's anything to do with the choices that I made. It was more about the people and the places that I surrounded myself with. So initially, when she was at the very beginning of her career, she was kind of in like a very limiting environment where people were kind of setting what her expectations would be, and she never really felt like she resonated. So she kind of like tried to put herself out there and connect with more like-minded people, but also have a diverse array of people around her, because if you have too many similar people, you may end up in burnout. So like we see this with like all the high achieving founders that try and sit together, but in fact having like that diversity of people who are successful in their own rights and can support her and like have that ability to be able to flesh out different problems with each other and stuff. So maybe there's something in that. I'm not sure. I think like I resonated very much with that. And as a founder myself, I agree that it's nice to have like-minded people around you, but it's also nice to have a diverse amount of people around you.
Yeah, I really think that's right. What Amity's saying. Um, Compassion-focused therapy often happens in group settings. I suppose a therapeutic version of what Amity's talking about. And when you get a collection of, let's say, 10 people who are really awful to themselves together, um, very often they have a serious deficit of self-compassion, but a surplus of outward focused compassion. You put them in a group together and they'll heal each other. As therapists, we have to do very little after a while. So there are environments where healing can be a natural consequence of our self-compassion deficits when you've got the right container for everybody else getting the advantage of how it's all outward focused, not inward focused. So each of them is being able to take in something from other people, and where they won't take it from therapists, someone who's suffered trauma will take it from another person who's suffered trauma. To go back to Amity's point, which was a really interesting question. I don't know if I addressed it properly, but where Amity was saying, as a therapist, um, can you imbue somebody with a sense of achievement when often you can't? They in group settings, in therapeutic group settings, they'll do it for each other, and they'll take it from each other.
I have a question. What is, let's call it true self compassion? I know that, self compassion may not be like treating myself with a new skirt, oh my God, so self compassionate, right? I know, I know it's not that, but what is true self compassion? I don't believe many people really
Yeah, yeah.
grasp, yeah,
It,
what it is.
it's usually changing a relationship with a hidden part of yourself, with what's known as an inner child. It's usually the inner child that's sort of really got the choleric attitude to its own emotional needs, because children are really very shame activated, and they'll change shape, and shame will do the contorting to contort children into a different shape. And I know I've been horrible to my younger self most of my life, and it's taken a lot of work to change that dialogue. But the first thing is to hear the dialogue rather than for it just to be an automatic process, so that I don't notice it. I'm horrible to myself, but it's second nature. So I don't. First thing is noticing it and actually saying, "I heard that," and then not fighting with the part that's maybe trying to reverse that. Um, so self compassion is firstly conflict reduction. It's firstly information retrieval, and then it's conflict reduction, and then it's actually active compassion. So telling an inner child, um, even though you don't like yourself, you are loved, and you're loved by me. Very difficult things to say for a lot of people. Very difficult for me to say. But I very often this is inner child work. Really, really deep self-compassion is often inner child work.
Thank you. Did you say I heard that at one point?
Yes.
I love that because a lot of times, for example, I would be vacuuming and I would hear something going on in the background, like a voice. It's not in my inner child voice. I don't think so. It was another voice, but it was telling me something. And I challenged it and was like, what is it? Say it out loud. I literally said that to myself in an empty room. Like,
Yeah.
I
That,
hear you
that's
saying something.
that's information retrieval work you are doing, and you are lifting it out of the unconscious or the subconscious. And if it stays in the unconscious, it can't be worked with. So what you're doing is you're making something explicit, that was implicit, in order to then be able to work with it.
Yeah, I didn't like that it was whispering to me. Just
Right,
like
right.
in
Because
the
it's whispering, it goes beneath the threshold of consciousness.
Oh, yeah. Okay. That's interesting. Like for example, I don't if you ask me if I did inner child work, I wouldn't be able to tell you that I do because I don't really know what it is, but sometimes I see glimpses. For example, when I feel tension in my body, and I when I can't take it anymore, I take my yoga mat out. I sit down and I just start moving or like swinging from side to side. And it's kind of a somatic practice to me. So I think 3 weeks ago, I had a conversation with my inner child where I told her um, that she can go play. She can go play because I feel like she thinks and she believes that she carries a lot of responsibility for myself. And that's what she was doing her whole life, and especially while growing up. I thought I had to be responsible for my parents, for the adults, basically. So now I am that adult,
Mhm.
and I'm not letting myself play, right? So that's why I said her, right? But it's all me. So I told her, go play. I'm responsible for us. Okay. I'm going to prepare healthy food. I'm going to work out. I'm going to take care of the money of the. You go play. You go relax. And I literally saw myself just wander off. It
That's
was, it
that's
was
good work. That's good self therapy.
hmm, I've read a lot of self-help books.
Clearly,
We'll add so many more to your list.
Now I'm in therapy. Like now I'm on the field. I'm out there. You know, I had the like knowledge, theoretical, now I'm practical.
Yeah. I think that's also one of the practical things, or initial desire to want to be more trauma informed in coaching or like in the work we do, is really to understand that the humans and parts of ourselves we've been talking about today are what people are bringing in the workplace and in their communities. And many of them do not have the chance to create that space where they can listen to themselves or where they can cultivate self awareness. Perhaps because shame is getting in the way, perhaps because life is getting in the way. And I think it's important to be able to set the example that, I mean, I'm a strong believer that awareness, self awareness, is 70% of the work.
Love that.
Then you can go and like utilize different techniques and strategies and therapies. But being self aware and being able to dissociate from the negative voices, being able to dissociate even from the inner child, and appreciate that presence, being able to understand that the person we show up as in the workplace can be improved, can learn different things by working on ourselves and understanding ourselves. That is really helping us advance the entire ecosystem that we're contributing to.
I think it might be twofold though. So, like, there's a lot of work that we need to do as individuals, but as businesses, I think one of the main perils I have, especially working now focused on startups, is, as founders, we get very disheartened by something and then we go away and we create something which we want to be better than what we've previously experienced. But in actual fact, we still have this toxicity wrapped in a shiny new wrapper of like enthusiasm and maybe a trendy founder or something. So I think there's like a huge amount of work that actually needs to happen on both sides of the equation. You can't have everybody being 100% high achiever all the time, working under ridiculous hours for as little money as possible, not seeing their families, not being connected to the things that they like, not eating well. So yeah, I feel like there's a lot of space for improvement in there as well.
Yeah, you can't heal in the environment that makes you sick.
Precisely. Yeah, I think that's why I resonated with your story about how you worked with a lot of big businesses and then you were building things for them and making them better or things stronger, but really you didn't like what they were trying to make you do, how they were trying to make you lie, the things that they were trying to make you sell. Like I had very similar experiences, and that's why I kind of went and did my own thing. But then now I help other startups who are just also perpetuating that cycle. They had a problem, but now they're just kind of doing the same thing. So it's like we all kind of go down this slippery slope, I guess.
Yeah. I think if I was to throw at you guys a brainstorm at this very specific moment, and I ask you, what is the opposite of shame? Throw in keywords.
Self-compassion. Story.
I would say freedom from negativity mainly.
Acceptance, self-acceptance.
Give me some more. Self-compassion, freedom from negativity, self-acceptance.
Being content.
I'll throw in self-love because obviously I can't be writing about it without.
It's very hard to eliminate shame entirely. I'm not even certain that would be a useful goal, but just an accommodation, I think, with shame. And I mean, it is true that not all shame is bad. Some shame does help externally with teaching lessons. But in your fields, margin errors are very powerful learning devices, and I'm sure a lot of business people have felt shame when they've made mistakes and slipped up, but they've probably, maybe, arguably, they've learned more from those mistakes than they did from their achievements. So I think there's some sort of accommodation we need with shame rather than seek shame elimination. We need to find a way of working alongside it better, I think.
Do we have an example?
From my experience, or from any of our experiences?
Well, yours or one of your clients. What does that look like when you accommodate?
It's hard to give a specific example, but you know it when you see it with a client, when they are still self-punishing, but when the anxiety and panic from the self-punishment starts to reduce, you know that they've come closer to acceptance. So you see it at secondary levels rather than, it's very hard to see shame, but you can see anxiety, you can see depression. When someone is self-attacking, when their inner critic is very harsh and severe in its attacks, you're going to get high arousal emotions like anxiety and low arousal emotions like depression. And when you see those ease, you realize people have made a easier accommodation with their shame, guilt, inner critic.
It's so interesting. I think like one of the things that I've noticed in like my personal experience, I've always went a bit down the rebel route of being like, well, you know what, I'm just gonna be an ass and just go for it, then learn to like me, and having that like aggressivity ahead, so so nobody can hurt you. And in that aspect, the relationship to shame was, well, I'm just going to be shameless, so I got nothing to be shameful about. It doesn't mean that the shame doesn't exist at certain moment, but it's almost having this playfulness of being like, oh, well, this seems shameful, so I'm gonna go and like shout out about it, therefore it's gonna hurt me less. And it's almost like exposure therapy.
Yeah.
In that sense. I don't know how you can ease yourself, or how you can.
We were talking about shame attacking before we started, and what you're talking about, Mona, is a form of shame attacking. And shameless is a lovely term. Doesn't mean you're without shame. Just means you're letting it all hang out, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it goes to the strategies that we put in place to neutralize negative voices or imposter syndrome, or whatever you want to call it, in just like identifying it. And the biggest mistake that we try to do with everything, with hard feelings, hard emotions, with this negativity, is to try to repress it and pretend like it doesn't exist. So we're not allowing ourselves to sit with these emotions. So the same way to process pain or grief or any hard emotion to go through, you have to sit with it. It's the same thing, I guess, with shame. Learning to sit with it, understand where it's coming from, build the self-awareness that helps you understand where it's coming from. Then sit with it and find ways to live with it, or make friends with it the same way as you do with your inner child or the negative voices.
I used to come across that phrase, sit with your pain, just sit with your pain. And I would see it like 200 times and I would lose my mind because I didn't understand, like, how the heck do I sit with the pain? Because I am pretty sure I tried sitting down.
In a corner, in a fetal position.
Right. And I was like, okay, here I am. I'm sitting down with the pain. Right? No TV on, phone on airplane. I'm sitting with the pain, but nothing happened. Nothing happened. until I learned what that could look like. But I learned that in therapy.
Mm.
There was no other way for me to learn and to really understand when I would read in a book. How can a person do that? How is it done? Therapy helped a lot.
Yeah.
Just that interaction. Oh, this is what it means to sit with the pain and try to see where it is in the body, right? Because my mind is like,
Mhm.
my tongue is, right? But when I breathe in and breathe out, and when I put my attention on the inside, then I could say, "Oh, it's here. I feel it here," and then I would describe it. And then my therapist would offer a technique, and then we would go down that route and explore it. So it's, maybe sitting with the pain is not really that passive. What I found out, it can be very active.
Mm. You
Yeah,
did mention action in
yeah.
other things, especially in self-compassion as well, that there was a component around action. I was listening in, because I was going to say I was reading a book, but that's not right. I was listening to this one, and it was about love and this preconceived idea, not preconceived idea, but vision about self-love. Everyone is like, love yourself. And you're like, well, what the fuck does it mean?
I don't know.
What is it to love yourself? Because if you don't have that feeling, how do you know what a feeling is like if you've never felt it? And in that book, it was very interesting to explore that you might not know what it feels like, but you can act on it. An act of self-love
Mm,
would go through how you would treat yourself, you would treat your body. What is the action
mm,
that you will put in place to show yourself that love?
mm,
And it really created that shift in between getting frustrated with, okay, we're dissociating from these emotions to, okay, there's a simple action plan.
mm,
Put one step in front of the other
mm,
and do things that go in that direction.
That's so true. When I say something like that to my sister, for example, she keeps telling me like my heart wants it and my mind wants it, but my body, something's wrong with my body. And I experienced that in somatic therapy sessions. Um, Michael, please correct me if I'm wrong, but something about body impulse, like
So,
my
sorry, but body
impulse.
impulse.
I didn't have that in my body. Like my
Mm.
mind and my heart, oh, they were craving it. For example, there would be a doll in the office, and sometimes it would represent my dad, right? I was working on something. And like I felt that I wanted to hug that doll, to go and hug my dad. But the impulse, it wasn't there, right? That's a long story. I won't get into it. But I understood what my therapist was kind of indirectly asking me, because I just sat there very uncomfortably and I just stared at the doll. And I decided to just stand up and hug that damn doll. Right? It was like, okay. But I manufactured those steps. I didn't feel it, but I took the action because I knew from other therapy session and experiences that that's the way. So sometimes we really do need to push ourselves,
Mhm.
especially if we know that something brings us results that we want.
Mhm.
It's damn hard, but it's manageable.
Well, I told you guys that this would go way faster than we think it goes. We have just about 5 minutes left, and we want to give a chance to the audience to slide in a last question if they have any. But don't worry, guys, If you don't manage to be present live, you can always DM me or connect with the rest of the panelists and DM your questions. Ask us in the comments. We will definitely love to answer you. There is one question that I want to ask quickly each of you to summarize in a minute or two. What's something that you're still shameful about and how you manage that? So it's something that you're shameful about, but that you manage. And you can go as crazy as you want.
I think I have a perfect example from the other day when we went to a restaurant, actually. This might be a good one. So I think when something is wrong, sometimes, even though I fix everybody's problems in my day-to-day, when something isn't as I anticipated and it's not delivered, sometimes I just leave it because I don't want to make other people look bad, particularly in hospitality settings. And then if people bring it up, I feel like maybe it's a big fuss. So for example, the other day I ordered a salad. It came out with the wrong thing. I just ate the salad and left the rest. But we decided to address it. And I thought they were going to bring out like sliced fresh tuna, but they brought out equivalent to like cat food, like canned tuna. And I felt so bad. And then we corrected it. And then they brought out another type of tuna, but they brought out so much of it that I couldn't eat it. So I felt really bad. It wasn't what I wanted. So I hid it. I hid it inside a serviette, and then I kind of strategically placed all the cutlery and plates on top of it. But I have so much shame around trying to correct other people's mistakes when it's not in like a client business context. So yeah, this is something that I'm always trying to work on, especially when it's directly related to myself. So yeah, I still have shame around this.
Yeah, if it was somebody else that felt that shame, what would you tell them?
So for instance, I'm very much about picking and choosing your battles. So I think it's like, how important is that correction to your life? And is it something that really needs to be? So for me, in a lot of these contexts, when things happen, I don't see them as necessary changes or necessary corrections. If it's something very, very big, like, maybe you're driving and you do something dangerous, or, these types of things make more sense in the grand scheme of things. But something like for me, this just brings like chaos into my life. So yeah, I would say it's really about picking and choosing your battles, and what is most comfortable and is going to bring you the most value, then you should probably address it.
Mona, was that your idea? Were you together?
I was definitely the one addressing the problem and making her feel ashamed. But one thing to add to that, and that's why like picking your battle is very important. Not when the mistake is something that the person is allergic to.
Yeah.
And this is where it becomes actually life-threatening. So of course, pick your battle, and I completely appreciate the shame of it. But again, I think someone with this shameful part as the fight or flight answer to trauma is very difficult to relate. But I know that there are millions of people who can relate to that. How many person would send back a dish if there was something wrong? Even if we gave you the wrong dish, like you would have it. If you can eat it, you'd have it, you leave it aside. Nobody ever sends their dishes, or you call them Karens. And I think that's, again, where society doesn't help this out, is we're calling out people who are wanting to just get their own right. I'm not saying all Karens are right, but I'm just saying that we're contributing to the culture of shame sometimes. What is something, maybe one of you guys have something that still make you shameful? One of these little details in our day-to-day life.
Michael, can I go first?
Please.
Because I'm very ashamed about this. I just want to get it over with. Okay. I'm a smoker. I stopped smoking regular cigarettes, but I smoke e-cigarettes. What is the difference there? I don't know. I just I don't smell that bad anymore. But how do I manage it? Oh my God. Um, again, in my therapy sessions, I found out that what how I see smoking, and it's very hard for me to talk about this, but it's when I feel like the walls are closing in. I want to just inhale something. And if I'm a smoker, then it means like the walls are constantly closing in on me. But that's a lot of anxiety. So it's like a lot of smoke is coming directly at me, and I want to just, blow it away. But it kind of feels like I have to first inhale that smoke to blow it away. So that's why I'm succeeding at finding self compassion around this issue. It's an issue for me that I'm still smoking. That's how I'm finding it, because I know that it comes from a lot of pain, and that pain, I think it goes way back into maybe when I was a baby even. Um, I just don't feel safe. I just don't feel safe, and cigarettes make me feel safe.
I think that's very brave. I think it's very brave the way you've described that, and I think it suggests that you've got very good level of self knowledge, and the fact that you're not attacking yourself for it, but being able to talk about it in a forum like this is the best reason to think that you'll get where you want to be, wherever that is. But I think that's very brave.
It means a lot.
Yeah, you definitely. Thank you so much for sharing, both of you, because it takes courage to actually share what we're shameful about. And I think you also are doing a massive favor to the audience, and not only to yourself and each other, because we learning that actually to battle shame or befriend shame, we've got to pick our battle and understand that not every battle is worth fighting. And also try to understand yourself a little better, because with self knowledge, you can create it and nurture that self compassion. So, with that, Michael, I'm calling you out here. What is your little dirty secret?
Well, I think the three of you already know what it is. And it was me putting post it notes all over my face so that I wouldn't have to see myself on camera, on Zoom, or wherever it happens to be. Public speaking, visibility. So thanks, the three of you, for forcing me to meet my nemesis face on, head on.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing, for showing up. This was a very special episode. To be honest, I do say that to all the speakers, but don't hear that to them. But
Special. Okay.
it has been very unique, that is for sure, and very unusual. So thank you so much for showing up, being your authentic selves, and contributing to hopefully inspire others, inspire each other in this journey. Um, Thank you so much, our dear audience, for joining another episode on resilience or watching the recording. Of course, it is a pleasure to be with you, and I will end the stream. Don't forget, reach out on LinkedIn to each of our speakers, connect with them, ask them your questions, leave your questions in the comments. We are here to address anything you want to address. If you have a little dirty secret that you want to share with us, please